time. So I'll just start off with a little introduction. My name is Chuck Collins. I'm the executive director for Southeast Georgetown Community Council, and we put on this webinar once a month to talk to regular folks who are from communities that are traditionally marginalized, to allow them to answer questions and to tell their stories, to share their experience with the rest of us. There is for those of you who just joined, there is a link in the chat that will allow you to ask anonymous questions of the panelists. You can also vote on a question. The most popular questions get asked first. All right. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. I would like to, before I introduce the panelists, I would like to tell you why I believe things like this are important. And because I'm the host, I get to tell my own story, right? And this is the only time tonight, hopefully, you'll hear my story. One of the reasons why we wanted to do this is something that happened to me a few years ago at a powwow here in Southwestern. I made a huge mistake without realizing it, and offended somebody without realizing it. And there was a young lady who was dancing in the jingle dress competition at a powwow. And I sat down to eat some fry bread, and she sat down near me and my wife, and we struck up a conversation. And everything was going great until I said one sentence. And the sentence I said was, I really like your costume. It looks like you put a lot of work into it. And she immediately, our conversation at that point was over, right? I realized I had said something wrong, but I didn't know what it was. So no matter how much I could apologize and how much I said I was sorry and how much I asked for me to be corrected, right? What is the correct term? By the way, the correct term is regalia. I will always remember that because of this incident, and I felt horrible, and there's nothing I could do to fix it. So hopefully this is something I can do to help fix that for myself, but also so that other people don't inadvertently, cause somebody offense, right? Or cause somebody hurt. And the only way we can do that is if we get to know each other better, right? And get to know each other's languages, right? Get to know what drives people and what their experiences are like. So with that, I'm just going to go around I'm going to introduce our panelists. I'm just going to go around the screen that I see. So I'll start with Marissa Gomez Palmer. If you wouldn't mind introducing us and to yourself and let us know who your people are and just a little bit about yourself.
Hey, hi everyone. So my full name's Marissa Elena Gomez Palmer. Palmer's my maiden name, which I think most folks could have figured out. So I'm, like a lot of people, I'm mixed. So I'm Latinx and I'm Native, and my Native people are Cherokee, which I grew up more with the Cherokee tradition, and Apache. And unfortunately that happens a lot with Native people, that they get disconnected or they're cut off. And there's a big history of that, and maybe we'll get into that on the call, due to like colonization and movement, involuntary movement. And I grew up here in Texas, and that's about it for me.
Okay, and then Lisa Nava and Ben Nava and Angel Nava, sorry. Can you introduce yourselves and kind of the same deal, like where you're from, who your people are?
I'm Ben Nava. I'm an Nippon Apache, and we're from here in Texas. And there's some in Mexico, and there's some in New Mexico. There's also some in the Choctaw Apache in Louisiana, cousin tribe. And they're the Choctaw Apache of Ebar.
What? Lisa?
And I was raised all over because my dad was in the military, so it's kind of like jumped all over the place.
All right. All right. Thank you. And you've got a toddler as well. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So I am Angel Bunch, well, Nava. I am their daughter. I was raised here in Georgetown. I don't know what else. And we're Lip on Apache. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm Lisa Nava, because I'm Ben's wife, Angel's mom. We do have 3 boys, and so we have Benjamin, RJ, and Joseph, and some of them will get on and be able to talk. My family is mainly, we always grew up Hispanic, but I do know on both my maternal grandmother and grandfather's side, there was native blood, but we never had anybody that could actually say what nation that we actually belonged to. We just knew that there was native blood. So it runs kind of deep in our family. So, and I was born and raised here in Georgetown. So
Thank you. Bobby?
I'm Robert L. Fain. I go by Bobby Fain. I grew up with a single parent, my dad, and his mother was Comanche. And my dad, in raising me up, never spoke too much about the tradition, other than he was raising me up with a tradition, and I didn't realize it until I was 7 or 8 years old that he was teaching me the Comanche way. Now, my mother is like Pan Apache, and on my mother's side, of course, I'm not a young man. I'm already 70 years old, so everybody's gone, deceased. That I know, that I knew when I was a young man. But many of my mother's side of the family of Apache, by Pan, were in the reservations, and some of their children are still in the reservations in Oklahoma, up by Canada, Wisconsin. And on my father's side, almost everyone has already passed. Of course, unlike people my age, you have a lot of relatives that are native that you don't make contact with because you settle in your ways with your family. But I've always lived a tradition that my dad taught me. And like my dad taught me, when I realized I was being taught the native way, I said, I think we're going, Dad, I think you're not teaching me ways of the European ways. Is there a reason, you want me to be? And he said, yes, I don't want you to forget who you are. And I don't want you to forget your culture. Everybody's got a culture. You see the people that come to America, the ones that speak Spanish, that they're proud of their Spanish heritage. Asians, they're proud of their Asian heritage. Indian from India, Chinese, everybody's proud of their heritage when they come to America. And they maintain their American status, but they also maintain their culture. And their culture is what helps them survive, exist, because you can't change the tradition of the person that you are. And I learned that real young. I learned that in going up in school. I think once people found out that I was a Native American, they'll never let you forget it. So that's just the way that I came up with the culture and ways.
All right, Bobby, thank you. And then Nava Family 4, I'm going to rename you. What name should I put on there?
Benjamin.
All right. Okay, Benjamin, go right ahead.
I am Benjamin Nava Jr. I am Ben and Lisa's son. I'm their oldest son. Like they've said before, we are Lapon Apache. Not only that, we were also adopted into the Oglala Lakota community there in South Dakota on the Rosebud Reservation. So we grew up knowing these traditions and these ways. So.
All right, thank you. And there's one more Nava family member, but you don't have your camera on.
That's Joseph, and he's at work, so he can't.
Okay.
Only listen.
Okay, I'm gonna change him then to a.
You just have to.
We just won't talk to him. How about that? Okay. Okay, so let's get on with our first question. So our first question, and this person didn't want to be anonymous, so I'll let you know who it is. His name is Walt Doring, and he asked, whether local, state, or federal, what policies or structures do you think keep Native people oppressed? I'll open that up to anyone who wants to answer first.
What? What was the question?
Can you repeat the question?
What is keeping Native people down? Right, we're keeping the Native tribes of America down and oppressed.
I think that the people they're not so much oppressed as Native Americans by the system. We all know that as Native Americans and like everybody else in society today, it was just like my dad told me when I was a kid. He said, you got to look like a European, you got to dress like a European, and you got to work and communicate and talk their language, and you won't have any problem. So everybody's doing the same thing, whether you're a Native American or African American or Chinese or whatever you are. And I think with Native Americans is we lose a lot of communication with the rest of Native Americans because we are so far apart. I think we need to, we have to go and interact like powwows come in. The powwows come in, we need to interact the Native Americans and let them know who we are, let them know who we are as a people and what their problems are. If they're living on the reservation, like I had lots of family, the reservation life is really different from the life that you live out here in society. I really do think that Native Americans that live out here in society that are not living on the reservation have more of a greater ability to help all Native Americans, regardless of what tribe they are or reservations, than the people on the reservations. They are the ones that are really truly oppressed because they don't have the proper representation as per capita population, and you can see that clearly in the House of Congress or in the House of the Senate or anywhere else. And I think Native American people can contribute greater as Americans to Americans or all Americans if they have that proper representation. Otherwise, we have to keep fighting for it for them while we're out here in society making a living under the rules of law. So I just think there needs to be, in order to really discuss the unfairness that maybe the federal, I don't think the local government gives us too much problem. You pay your taxes and obey the laws. They're pretty well don't even care what you are, who you are. As far as the federal government, it would be very difficult to get any kind of assistance from the federal government once you're living out here in society, not on the reservation and not on under tribal ways and customs. Your customs and your culture is going to be tied on to the territorial rights of your tribe in those reservations. And once you're not there, you pretty well lose all those rights. Benefits, I guess you could fight for benefits if you wanted to, if you really felt that you needed those benefits. But I think the oppression that Native Americans are getting in society is very much like the oppression that all the races of people are getting. If you feel an unfairness, I think it's just better if you don't describe or if you don't place the priority of the unfairness on who you are and what you are, but you're representative as an American citizen. I think when you live off of the reservation and you don't live tribal customs, I think what we all are now is we're all becoming Native Americans because we're all almost that have any kind of a third or fourth generation custom to our culture. We're all just Americans, but to live the way that I want to live and to continue my tradition, I do it. Nobody tells me not to do it. I just do it, and I think that that's the best way that you can tackle these problems that are out here in society. And if you feel an unfairness, then direct it at your local district representative and then go up from there.
All right, Bobby. Thank you very much. Is there anybody else like to add to what Bobby has said? Or has he pretty much covered it?
He's pretty much covered quite a bit of it, really. So
I think the only other thing I would add that's hard is that when people who aren't Native talk about Indigenous persons, they speak of them in a past tense. Like we don't exist anymore, or we were kind of an invisible people. And there's like a hashtag going through the Native community, hashtag something else, because during the election recently, they said African American, Latino, and then they just put something else. And so there's all these funny memes going around because, you know, it's kind of part of the resilience, right? Is the sense of humor.
Don't let them do that to you. When you see those, I can tell you because of my age and experience, when you see those forms and applications where they want you to sign up as to what they want you to be, don't cooperate with that. You put down on there, I am Native American, I am Apache or Comanche, I am Native American. Don't put down white. You're not white, and you don't practice white ways because our government has slipped into a dirty sock, so to speak, and they just want everybody to be what they want them to be, what they want you to be, and don't do that.
Yeah.
You just stay where you are and say who you are. If they don't like it, that's too bad, you know. But don't let them call you white if you're not white. Don't let them call you your culture and say that this is your culture and this is what the census says you are, and that's what it is, and you can't do nothing. Don't do that, and you'll make your point across. You'll get your point across, and I think you'll start showing the federal government, which is what we're really talking about here, that listen, there's more of us than what you think that there are up here. of our race and culture, and we're living our race and culture because we're a free people and we're a free country, and this is who we are.
Yeah.
And we don't want you to make us what you want us to be. So
And Bobby,
you can end that. You can end that by doing that.
and Bobby, that brings us to our next question, actually. Just about identity and about the fact that, as other panelists have mentioned, being considered a forgotten people or being referred to in past tense. The question is, what do you wish schools would teach about the history of this country?
The truth.
Mhm.
The truth.
Yep.
Genocide.
Word. Yeah.
That's it in a
That's
nutshell.
the easiest way to put it is the
Yeah.
truth.
Yeah.
I mean,
We-
their motto back in the day was "Kill the Indian, save the man."
I'm sorry, can you repeat that, please?
When the biggest issue is boarding schools, where they would take all the Native American kids and put them in these boarding schools, and basically their motto was "Kill the Indian, save the man." That
Oh, wow.
they were allowed to be anything but Native. They weren't allowed to speak their language. They weren't allowed to practice their culture. They weren't allowed to do anything like that. So that is, I forgot where I was going.
And
Which a lot of them were molested and killed.
Yeah,
and
that's something that people don't talk about.
You want to, like, they cover it up, but then how are people gonna learn from their past when they don't have anything to look at? They cover it up because they don't want nobody to know how it was. Because a lot of it was the churches and stuff like that. They did a lot of bad stuff to the Native kids and stuff like that, and they try to keep it under the blanket. They need to teach all that, let them know why some of us are the way we are. We're like if some don't like white people because a lot of that still they hear the stories from their grandmas and their grandpas and their aunties and uncles. They tell them these stories, and that's how they feel about how a lot of them are.
And there was a lot of Christianity involved because they didn't understand our spirituality, and they just assumed incorrectly that it was evil, or it was heathen or something like that.
It's
And
like the
so
crown dancers, they call them devil dancers.
Yeah.
they're God mountain spirit dancers. So they choose what they wanted to call our stuff, and that's not what we called it. Like a lot of the tribes, they call them this and that, and that's not what they didn't call themselves. We didn't call ourselves Apache. We were the Inde, and stuff like that. It's like the Lakotas, they didn't call themselves Sioux. And then the Creeks, they didn't call themselves that either. They gave them names that they live by the creek, so they call them Creek, or some people call them enemy. Call us enemy Apaches, and that's what they called us. And it's like they need to ask the indigenous communities who they say they are, not by what other people say they are. Stuff like that.
Very true. Very true. And just kind of speaking of the past, do you think that reparations should be paid by the U.S. government, or I guess no, just the U.S. government, in the same way that African Americans have asked for reparations?
Well, if you look at the you say reparation like a lot say, oh, y'all get all this free stuff. No, it's in the treaties. All the stuff that they're getting is in it's treaty rights, and a lot of that's violated already anyway. They're saying this and that, but in reality, it's they're not fulfilling their end of those treaties.
Yeah, I also think it's kind of it's a different situation, right? With African Americans, they were enslaved, stolen, brought over here. With Indigenous people, foreign invaders came in, and because Indigenous people I'm speaking very generally across tribes, but most don't kind of acknowledge or didn't have that concept of owning land. You were interacting with nature, and you were interacting with the earth. And so these foreigners came in with this concept of ownership and took. So I don't know that reparations is the right word, because it's kind of more about you stole it.
Yeah.
Well, the thing about it is with with native cultures, we were taught that we don't own the land. The land owns us. We belong to Mother Earth.
Yeah, and
So
I
it's one of
think
those
it's more
things
about
where
being guardians,
exactly.
But I mean,
Bobby? Oh,
that's another, that's, you know, with another misconception is they, people automatically think you're Native American, so you get all of this money. You know, we used to do presentations for our, you know, for different schools, and everybody's like, oh, well, your kid's college fund is paid, y'all are paid for, you know, because y'all get all this money, you get all these scholarships. And we're like, we don't get anything. Lipon Apaches are not a federally
Yeah,
recognized, so we don't get that. They did not become state recognized until our son and daughter were freshmen in high school. So it's not, so people automatically assume, because people, they're, you know, some tribes have casinos and they have, you know, they get per capita, that all Indian, all Native Americans do. And that's where they have to understand it's not like that. Not everybody. That's why there's so many issues. And I know I saw somebody had posted about the alcoholism, and that's part of it, is so many have lost their identities because of the fact that they you know, they lived in these boarding schools, or they had all of this stuff happen to them, and that's their way of dealing with this, because they don't have what we need, you know, the counselors, the teachers, and all of that, to be able to help our, you know, help them with the stuff that's going on.
I would imagine it's generational as well.
Yes.
Intergenerational trauma.
Yes.
Bobby, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Well, you know, reformation, benefits, whatever they want to call it. I think that if you're going to ask somebody to give you benefits or to help you with your education, and because of the culture of people that you are, from the people who, like you said, that stole everything, that took everything, I think hell will freeze over first. So the process that they're going to do is going to be extremely difficult to get anything for them. Now, legislatively, yes, there can be an instrument that can be uh, litigated as to the tribes of people that are out there trying to get an education, to make sure that at least if we can't afford to compete because of the unaffordability, that this kind of assistance could be given to, say, our children. They're the ones that are really going to have to be in. If I go back to the old people, what they used to advise me is you have to be whatever you do with European ways of life, you have to be better than them. If you're going to get an education, teach your kids to go get an education and to make, yes, all you need is a passing grade to pass, but make the best grade you can be, and be the best that you can be, better than the people who are uh, smothering you out, because they will smother you out. You'll be out of sight and out of mind if you try to compete in this system. And the only way you can win in this system is to, if you want to be in who you are, is, yeah, go to bed and pray like a Native American. Don't pray like a European. You, like the young man said, the land is us and we are the land. That's a religion. That's a faith. That's how our faith in God is, the Spirit is that we have to understand that when we go to bed each night and get up each morning, that we are who we are, and we have to be better than those that don't want us to be successful. And it's going to have to start with our children, because most of us that are, say, 50 and above, we pretty well struggled most of our life to be just where we are. If we've succeeded in the same ways that they succeeded, count it a blessing. Count it a blessing. Count yourself successful, because you're living just as good as they are living. You're eating just as good as they are. You are just as good as they are. And you lack no more than what they lack. Of course, they've got the millions of dollars, but they've got the millions of worries too. So if you're happy, just continue to be the very best that you can. Teach your children to be honest, truthful, and to show those ways to these people, because Europeans definitely do not have that way. They definitely do not value the truth. They never have. A lot of them are trying to, and just show them who we are, and everything that we do, and the way that we act and interact with them. That we're upright and honest, and they'll see who you are and what you really are, or who you really are and what you really are, and they'll start respecting you. But
Hey, Bobby.
Yeah, the I would be very satisfied if the benefits would come into, if nothing else, for the kids to be able to go to college, to school, and help them in their grade levels to achieve those levels of grades that they need to go to those universities.
All right, thank you. So the next question here, I'm gonna skip one down because I wanna make sure we have time to ask this question, and I'm gonna add a little bit to it. So someone has asked, is genetic testing helping you to connect to other known or unknown relatives and your heritage? And I'm gonna add a little something to that. Many people in the States have stories, family histories, that include relatives or ancestors that were Native American, and they only find out sort of. There's a whole thing with genetic testing, but they only find out sort of whether it's true or not through genetic testing. However, there's been some talk that does that really make you Native, right? Is it the blood or is it the culture? Kind of a narrative. So I would like to hear your thoughts on that. We'll just start with Benjamin. You haven't got to talk a lot, so.
So, with that being said, a lot of it has to do with the culture. Yeah, you can be blood, but at the same time, you're not gonna follow your traditions. You're not gonna follow your ways. It all depends on who you are, like how you're raised. Like we're up on Apache, but we follow the Lakota ways of life. So, and like I said, we were adopted over there. So when somebody asked me what native are you, I always mention I'm Lakota and I'm Apache. Like I may not be blood Apache, blood Lakota, but we are adopted and we do follow those ways. With that blood quantum, it's one of those things where only natives are said, hey, the blood quantum tells you who you are. It registers you. But it's one of those things. It's like the government wants. It's they're telling us who we are.
Can you explain a little bit? Well, for me, but also for the people listening, can you explain blood quantum, or anybody else on the panel?
So, Ben, you would be able to explain more about that.
The blood quantum was like your full blood. Each generation you marry out, you lose a quarter, and each time you marry out of your tribe or the people, you lose your Indianness. What they say is like it's another form to me. If you look at it, so a lot of people say, "Oh, that's good because we know if you're Indian or not." But another way, look at it, it's another form of genocide because each time you marry out, they say you have to be quartered to be enrolled or less than that. Say my daughter be quartered, and then my grandkids they won't be Indian no more, but they grow up in these traditions and all that. How is that? And then the other thing is only two other things that I know of that they go by quantum. That's dogs and horses. So they categorize us in that same category. To me, that's how I see it.
Well, and I
find it,
think,
oh, go
oh,
ahead.
sorry, Jack. I've always found it really problematic that I think Native Americans, because, indigenous people are all over the world, but Native Americans are the only ethnic group that are forced to prove who they are
Yeah,
through this blood quantum. And who is, for all intents and purposes, a foreign invader to dictate how we define who we are, and because it is much more about culture and less about blood. If you're raised from a baby in a certain culture or from a kid, or you're adopted into a culture, that's your culture.
Yeah.
I find it interesting that over the generations you become less Native, but if you're Black, it just takes one Black person to marry in for your family to become Black, right? It's like it's a reverse Jim Crow law. Sorry, I find that interesting. It seems like the rules change depending on who you are.
When it comes to tribal lands, so.
I'm sorry, Angel, can you?
So blood quantum, the way they see it too is when it comes to certain tribal lands, once those people just keep procreating to where there is no longer any registered by blood quantum, that means that tribe no longer exists. So by the US government, if nobody in that tribe no longer exists, they don't have, the way they see it is they wouldn't have to follow those treaty rights, which is why they have that blood quantum, is because once they see that as you aren't Indian anymore, there isn't any more of that tribe, then that's going to be their way of saying, well, there's no more of you guys, so we can just take this land back that you got in those treaties.
Pretty close to it.
Wow. Bobby, you were going to say something as well?
I because of my age difference, I had an experience concerning the Native American heritage that I'm from. I was about 6 years old when I went to visit and to visit her mother, which is my grandmother. And we were there when my grandmother's mother was there, so it was my great grandmother. And then we were there when my great grandmother's mother was there visiting. All, I guess what you would call, I would be the fifth generation, and we were all the same Native Americans from the same tribe. As a matter of fact, my mom was explaining to me that no one had actually married out of the family other than her, that married into mixed Comanche race person. So if you have any memory, recollection of your mother, your grandmother, your great grand and your great grandmother, like I was, and as a matter of fact, I even had the experience of that great grandmother taking me to a grave where our ancestors were buried and explained to me something what you all have experienced, where your people have kind of spread out to where you don't have proper documentation of who you're related to, that spread out before you were able to ascertain or prove of your heritage. A lot of that was because, as my grandmother explained to me, when I saw the armor of Spaniards that was taken away and by our family, and that they were killed. The Spanish were killed, and the armors were laid in the grave as relics of their enemies that they had buried with them, kind of to let us know that this is the first people that came here, and they were our enemies, and they were our friends, and we had to destroy them. This is how far we go back. But as my mother explained, it was also because when we ventured out and still tried to maintain the territories, then came the European with the European ways and chased us across the border of Mexico, across the border of Canada, all over the place, into reservations. Some of us escaped kind of like slaves, black slaves did their masters from the reservations and wandered back out into territories so that they could continue the only lifestyle or culture that they have. A lot of that is tied in together. So you may be confused and lost your heritage records because they're not on paper. They're through your ancestors. They're through your parents. And you may have lost those because as my great-grandmother explained, we were on the run to live, to escape persecution, imprisonment, or genocide. So that's where a lot of Native Americans are disenfranchised. We're disenfranchised because about 1864, the big Indian Native American Wars, and then of course the Midwestern Wars. Everybody knows Lakota and the Little Bighorn, and many people fled of many different tribes, even those tribes that fought Custer. Many of them gathered together that fought him to join together to leave, to coexist, and to survive, heading towards Canada, heading towards the West, heading towards Mexico. Mexico was a big refuge of many Comanche, Apache, Navajo, a big refuge for many tribes of Western Central Texas tribes. So if you've lost your forefathers' records, don't feel bad because of that, because that was intended. Like the young lady was saying, that was intended so that you would be disenfranchised from the federal government's litigations of who owns the land, who has rights to the land, and who doesn't. So you're in that category, and just hold on to your birthright, your mother's, your grandmother's, and if you're fortunate like I was, of course, those times were a lot more simpler. But where everybody I met was in my family was Native American. Then you really don't need quantum blood. You really don't need nobody telling you who you are. You already know who you are simply by asking your mother, simply by asking your grandmother, your mother's mother, and great-grandmother, and great-great-grandmother. You were that fortunate. So that in itself, now they lost their customs, and they lost knowledge of their customs because their forefathers were forced to flee in as many directions as they could in order to have the ability to survive. So that was designed that way. There's nothing we can do about that.
Well, thanks, Bobby. Bobby, I'm sorry to interrupt you. And by the way, folks, we're neighbors. So if I make Bobby mad, he can just come over to my house and take care of it. Just walk across the street. But I did want to get to a couple of other questions.
Oh, yes, sir.
Don't worry, I will pay for this tomorrow. Um, uh, so the next question is, are there phrases that people casually use that Indigenous people or Native Americans find offensive? Something in everyday English language?
What?
So is
So,
there things, you know,
I
go
think
ahead, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I know I hear a lot of stuff at work in business. There's because business, corporates, offices love, I don't know, phrases. But there's some that they don't even think about where they come from, like circle the wagons when they talk about, which means like, let's put our heads together. But instead there's this reference to that. Or there was another one I heard, holding down the fort. Well, who are you holding down the fort from?
Yeah.
And people, we get conditioned to this, or referring to like a meeting as a powwow.
Yes. Yeah, let's have
Powwow.
yeah.
Yeah, they see that at work and I kind of look at them, oh, I'm sorry. Don't
So
say
what?
it.
So one of the ones that my son wanted me to mention is Indian giver.
Mm.
So that one, I mean, Native Americans are a very giving people, and so we tend to give, pretty much everything that we have. Like, if we're being honored, so if you have like a head man or head lady at a powwow, they're the ones giving gifts. They're not the ones receiving them. If people are being honored, most people will give them gifts, but we're totally different. And so the term Indian giver, the way it's used is you give something, but then you take it back. But that is not us. We don't take it back. It's like when we give it, we give it. We give of ourselves. And so that's one of the ones that's really irritating.
Yeah.
For that.
Especially when you look at the history, it wasn't Native Americans that were taking things. I'll just put it that way. This is not the beat up Caucasians hour, right? Yeah. But it always struck me as weird as a child, that phrase.
Well,
oh no, go ahead.
So I mean, and even that's like with, we get into like with the mascots, where how they have mascots and they're like, oh, we're doing this to honor you, but that's not what it is, and so that's what causes, a lot of it too, is they don't look at us as a race and a people. They make fun of us, they'll try and, a lot of it is the stereotyping of what they think we should be.
And again, it perpetuates that same idea that we're in the past and this is who we are. I think it's not a phrase, but it annoys me to no end. Like, annoying is a mild phrase. It just kind of makes me see when I see the costumes, the actual costumes at Halloween.
Yeah.
And I mean, Indigenous people aren't the only group, but it is one of the most popular Halloween costumes, especially for women. It's very objectified. It's very sexualized, and it feeds. I mean, there is a crisis amongst Indigenous women as far as missing and murdered.
Yeah.
And it's like almost, I mean, it's starting to gain more voice, but it went just unacknowledged for so long. And so things like those costumes create that, and they objectify, and it's just so incredibly disrespectful. And there's other cultures that see that, because I see them from my Latin side. I see people dressed up like a Mexican, and I'm like, no one's heritage is a costume.
Yeah.
Which is where I made my mistake at the powwow, right? just kind of blundering into all of that without a single thought in my head as to why that would be offensive. Again, if I could apologize to that young woman more, I would do so. Bobby, is there a phrase that particularly kind of puts your back up?
I'm going to keep it short. Well, I I'll tell you, being in the Marine Corps for 6 years, I heard all the names. But I don't know why it did not bother me as much. I know when I would be out there with the guys and someone would say, "Hey, engine," or "Hey, engine," and I said, "Wow, this guy actually knows what I am and who I am." And I said, "I'm getting to him." I just always looked at it like, if they're going out of their way to call me a name of who I am, I'm getting to them. So I would just kind of smile and let it go. And then from there on, I made it a point to prove that I was just as good, if not better than him. And I think that's the best way to deal with name callers. So they're going to call everybody. I mean, if they're calling you an Indian, they're calling a black person an N-word. If they're calling that,
Hey, they call us that too.
Yeah.
it's just, you're not going to stop it. So what you do is just take it with a grain of salt. Look at them, give them a dirty look, or just let them know that, hey, I'm just as good as you are, and teach your children the same way. Teach your kids, I'm just as good as you are. We're gonna get out here in a minute. We're gonna run 5 miles, buddy. You're gonna be behind me. Then whatever you're calling me, you're gonna eat. So prove to them that you're just as good as they are. Don't get into a big thing with them, because really that's what they want you to do. I mean, you can, if it really gets too bad, then, they've got names you can call too. So, let it go at that. But it just really, I'd always look at it like, if they are going out of their way to call me a name, it's because I'm getting to them. So just show them that you're just as good as they are, if not better.
Thank you. Our next question, and I'm going to kind of combine a couple of questions here. What cultural traditions are most meaningful to you? And what traditions or practices do you think would be helpful to people during this pandemic? So this would be maybe practices that you can share with people who are not Native.
Oh, it's like you like smudge your house, smudge with cedar or some sage. That helps clean the air in the area. As far as that, and then like us is like they say not to, but we've been doing a lot of sweats and stuff. We're still doing them, but it's just this is what we do, who we are.
Are you sweating with your masks on?
Nope. Yeah.
It's funny because like different tribes use different things to burn. Like some smudges are sage, some are cedar. Like because of the Latin influence with me, it's Palo Santo.
Yeah.
So but it doesn't matter what it is. It's the act of it, and it's not only cleansing, like it's spiritually. Mm-hmm. It's like both. And then
spiritual and medicinal.
Yeah. All drugs that are created, the components that make them active were extracted from plants.
Yeah.
So plants, teas, herbal medicines, this is where it starts. This is what the shamans were talking about. This is what, and I don't know if people understand that shamanism is so much more complicated. It's like a doctor and a spiritual leader and a psychologist all like wrapped into something. It's really hard to describe if you haven't experienced it. But just reconnect with nature. And I think it was very cool to me very early on in the pandemic to see the earth healing in some areas because we just stopped.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's like this great book called The World Without Us. And it's actually, the idea is like all of a sudden human beings are gone. What starts to happen to the cities? Nature takes back.
Everything is back. Yeah, the earth is healing itself.
Yeah.
So considering that schools don't teach us as much as they should about Indigenous and Native culture, what can people do to educate themselves about Indigenous people's history and their culture? Is there something you can recommend?
Yeah, like you were saying about the schools, teaching, but then they also need to respect the culture of them, the boys having their hair long and stuff too. They say,
Exactly.
a lot of the schools say, "Oh, we're a diverse school." I think they contradict themselves saying they're diverse when in reality they're making these young men, well, y'all need a haircut. Y'all need a haircut. Like, why?
Another thing about with the schools is there is some schools where there are native kids speaking in their own language, and then they get sent to the principal's office for it. That's like you can speak Spanish and you can speak English, you can learn German and all these other languages in school, but when you speak your native language, because they don't understand it, then it becomes bad for them to speak their own
They don't
language.
understand it. There's still like a lot of the school districts here in Texas. Still, a lot of the kids have to fight to have their hair long. You got a lot of people like, a lot of ones that are going like Juan Matias and Frankie Arona and all of them. A lot of them are good speakers, and they go a lot to help a lot of issues and stuff.
But was that an issue here in Georgetown?
No, it actually what hasn't been. We would go and talk with the schools when they started school.
So our boys were fortunate that as far as the school district did not have an issue with them having long hair, but all three of our boys had issues with kids making fun of them, calling them girls, that they all at one time or another came home and said, "I'm cutting my hair," because of how they were being picked on.
There was a lot of times I got into fights as well at school because
it's kind of sad when these kids go to school and these other kids are making fun of them, and those other kids go to church and they're praying to somebody with long hair. They're like, "What's up?" Like it's stuff like that. Like everyday life, like that stuff like that. Or how we wear our hair or whatever. It always something's always said a lot of times. Some of the school districts, and that's a big issue that needs to be addressed too. Especially when you got some from coming out of state, like some come from Oklahoma, moved to Texas to some of these schools, and well, you got to cut your hair. And there were some that were out of school for 3 months fighting that. They couldn't go back to school.
It's funny to me because I always found it really weird when I was a kid, and I got kicked out of Sunday school a lot in Catholic church because I asked too many questions. But when they started telling the stories, one of the stories of Samson, they talk about the hair as his source of strength, right? And when it gets cut. And I thought, you have this story right here. Why don't you get that the hair is important? And it just was like that disconnect, just like Ben was saying, Jesus has long hair.
Yeah.
So we have 15 minutes. We have 15 minutes left. So I want to ask just a couple of questions that I see here that, and if I skip over somebody's questions and you didn't get your question answered tonight, we keep all the questions. So when we do part 2, sometime next year, those questions will be available as well, right? But for now, just in the interest of everybody's time, I think we've got maybe time for 2 more questions. And one of them is I think I kind of like this question, or at least I'd like this question to be answered. I think a lot of people think of Native Americans as kind of that noble savage, right? And are there issues of justice and equality, equity that arise between Indian nations, right? Because I think people see Native Americans as one block, right? As one, again, as part of the invisibility, I think, right? As one homogenous group. So is that actually true, or are there differences, and how are those differences usually addressed?
How they're different.
So
Like between, are there different, do the Pawnee and the Lakota have issues with each other? I think is where this question is going.
Well, yeah, there's still issues on different ones, especially like with the Hopi and the Navajo had a lot of issues and stuff, land issues and stuff like that. But a lot of them, like, we go through grassroots working with each other. That's what a lot of are doing now. Work with each other on different issues. Like the biggest one that with like had the most tribes come together and the most people was back at Standing Rock. You had a lot of people from all the tribes, people representing from all tribes there. Trying to help each other out, help out up there. So there might be some, but then there's a lot that people work together too.
And I've noticed more recent history is that Indigenous people, we know we're in the minority. I mean, and so there's a sense of, like, at Standing Rock is a perfect example. There was Indigenous people from all over the world who came there.
Yeah.
Because we realized that we have this common kind of creation culture and spirituality, and this you're supposed to work in harmony with the land, not against it.
Yeah.
So I'm sure there's some things, but when I went to the Gathering of Nations powwow, which is one of the really big ones out in New Mexico, it was just amazing I don't think I'd ever experienced so many Indigenous people in one spot. It was kind of like a culture shock for me, because you're used to being in the minority.
Yeah.
And it was like, it's awful that it felt weird. It should have felt like home, but it did eventually. It was just like overwhelming. And I remember hearing somebody say, wow, I wish we could always have gotten along instead of, maybe we would have had a better chance at survival if we go back into our history.
And speaking of that, Bobby, I know that we've had a discussion or two just about people as far as representation within Congress, the tribes kind of getting together for that. I'm not sure if you remember that conversation. We had it a couple months ago.
Yeah, I think it's good. I think it's going to be a lot simpler for the government to classify Native Americans as one people, regardless of what tribe you're from. Now, they want to, for whatever reason, want to get into some kind of litigation as to what could be done for this culture of people of this tribe. That would be um, the regional way of life of that tribe of people, say south, southwest, north, east. But if we can get the government to just see us as one people, Native American people, and it's true that, say, 200 years ago, we used to have our indifferences, and those indifferences also were because of cultures and rights of territory. But now that we've lost a lot of that, we can just see each other as one people. And of course, you can't deny your mother, your grandmother, your tribe, or the person the people that you're from. But if we can get the government just to see us as Native Americans, that's a big step. Now, being outside of the reservations and the reservation life we are going to be minorities. Because you can see how many immigrants are coming in from all over the world. Everybody wants to be in America. So because of that, we're going to feel like minorities. But hold who you are. Your roots are deep. You are the earth of this earth. The flesh on your bones comes from your father's flesh of his bones comes from the father's flesh of his bones, which came from this earth. So don't let go of that. You are about as American as not apple pie, but as a bear. So that said, if we get that and communicate that and bind together, whether we go to a powwow, whether we have meetings like this, as one people, yes, out here in society, you're gonna have to pass qualifications for all the jobs that everybody offers, trade, skills, knowledge, education, universities, but maintain who you are and as one people and keep your culture. And if we can do that, we're gonna get a lot more done for who we are, because we're not gonna stop being who we are. Those immigrants are not gonna stop being who they are, even if they become Americans or Americanized. So just hold on to who you are and your culture. And the feeling of isolation and the feeling of how did the young lady say being a minority? It's only because you're not living in the traditional life of the reservation, and I know what that's like because I had family in there. They're deceased now, so it's different. It is really different. I remember my grandfather came from that way of life, and there wasn't a man that would pass by him that wouldn't call him chief, and he did look like Sitting Bull. So everybody just saw him and called him chief. So I said, what's with this grandfather? You know, what doesn't bother you? He said, no. He said, I'll just never go back to the reservation. I'm working here in Illinois and Peoria, and I'm working and I'm making $30 an hour, and I'll never go back to that. That's why you're going to feel like a minority, because you're going to come out into the real world, and you're going to start competing, and you're going to start being like everybody else, and you're going to feel like a minority if you hold on to who you are, and hold on to what you are, and compete, be the best that you can at whatever it takes to do that, so that you can make $1 to the other guy, pay your home off, and to survive. That's it, like we were discussing that little bit a while ago about what we could do in school. History is so important. I mean, you don't have to go back to 240 years of American history concerning the Europeans, because they depended on us to exist. And that said, I think that what could be done to help Native Americans, help Europeans, and all the other people coming from all over the world, is to teach history and allow the Native American to represent his history in the history class about that. Even if the teacher is European, it's a lot better for, like, say that young man, the Lakota, to explain his history than it is even for the teacher. So that could be done. That would be a great improvement. Or, I mean, you're going to be talking about Black America, and there's a white teacher or a white professor talking about African Americans. Let a Black American participate as a Black American about his history. And we're all going to be better Americans because of it.
You know, Bobby, that, mentioning history kind of ties into our last question. And considering the time of year it is, I'm surprised the question didn't show up sooner than it did. But the question reads, hold on a second, I have to move this stuff around a little bit. Now that we're approaching the holiday season, do Indigenous people celebrate the Thanksgiving Day holiday? Or is it offensive that America celebrates this holiday? And I'm glad you mentioned the fact that the story goes that the Pilgrims needed the Native Americans to survive, right? So I'm gonna just kind of go around the panel here and ask, because we just have a few minutes left. So Lisa and Ben, how do you celebrate Thanksgiving, and do you find the holiday or the story offensive to you?
Well, I mean, mainly, we look at it just as a time to spend with our family. we did, you know, that's the deal. That's the only time that people think of Native Americans. Again, it's the past. They only think, you know, it's like Thanksgiving's coming up. Oh, Native Americans, you know, it's like, that's, again, they think about us in the past. We were doing, when Benjamin and Angel were in kindergarten, we went and did a presentation because they wanted to do something for Thanksgiving. And so we wanted to talk to them and explain a little bit about our culture. And so Ben had his hair in braids. And so they're like, oh my gosh, it's an Indian. And then we went to another activity the next semester, and Ben's still wearing his braids. And they're like, oh my gosh, he's still an Indian. It's like they thought he was only Indian for that one day to dress up. It wasn't, you know, that this is my way of life. I'm like this every day. It's, you know, so it goes back to where they only think of us in the past. It's not like we're still here.
Times. Yeah.
Marissa? Same question.
Yeah, no, in my household growing up, I mean, we did celebrate Thanksgiving, but we never had any of those pilgrim decorations or Indian. I don't have any recollection of that. The only place that I saw that was in school. And it was more just about giving thanks. And it was kind of like giving thanks to our Creator, giving thanks to our family, you know, a harvest, you know, because this is what it was. And several members of my family, you know, were like farmers or ranchers. And so there was this understanding of, you know, the cycle. And it's kind of funny because, like, so my husband is Caucasian but he's from Canada. And so it's always funny when I hear it referred to as Canadian Thanksgiving, because the Thanksgiving in the U.S. is associated, right, with the Pilgrims and Plymouth Rock and all that, you know, false narrative. And the Canadian Thanksgiving is really more of a harvest, and it happens in October because because of the cycles, right? So it's colder up there, and so and their Thanksgivings are very different. They're not. I've never seen anything when we've had it up there with like this whole pilgrim stuff. So it's really about just being thankful for what you have and your family, and you know. But like I said, we didn't grow up with any of that. And I remember one time I think I brought something home from school, and my grandmother was just like, you need to throw that away. Like it was like it was something they made me bring home, and it was pilgrims, and she's like, you need to throw that away.
When we were younger, they used to make like the headbands with like the feathers and stuff to dress up as Indians, and I got in trouble one time because I said, I'm not wearing that. It's like they want you to pretend, but we never did it.
Benjamin, do you have any thoughts on this?
So my thing is, like my parents, like my mom and dad said, we celebrate it, but as a time to spend with family. My thing is, every day should be giving thanks. So it's not just one day. That's everybody looks at it as, oh, this is my one day to give thanks every year. But no, it's every day you need to give thanks. My biggest thing on Thanksgiving, the way we used to celebrate when we were younger, what my favorite pastime was, we used to get plates and go and give them to the homeless people. That was one of my favorite pastimes with my family.
Bobby?
Yeah, we used to give plates out on Thanksgiving, but then they kind of said we can't do that anymore. Because I get, for some reason, like some of the organizations out there, they get all this federal funding to go feed homeless and stuff like that, and we kind of got in trouble for doing it because for some reason.
No, but a lot of it was we would go to Austin to feed the homeless, but later on we found out that the police department would round up all the homeless people and put them in jail, so you wouldn't know that there was homeless people in Austin, because that's when all the tourism comes and stuff. Then,
when it was time for them to eat, they let them out. Then once it was over, they go round them back up. we chased one elder gentleman down. Oh, when he told us he had to round us up, and when it was time for feeding time, they'll let us go. Then they'll pick us back up afterwards. And so you're like, God. Yeah, it's kind of crazy, a lot of stuff. And, you know, it's like you sit there and talk with a lot of them. And like some of them, one lady was there, and she never worked. Her husband had passed away, and he was the breadmaker, the breadwinner, whatever. And his Social Security and all that when they would keep up with taxes and all that stuff. So she wound up losing her home. You know, listening to a lot of those stories, and like, and you got people there sitting at the home, keeping to themselves when they could be out here giving to these out here. You know, a lot of people forget that you know, they will say giving thanks. You know, you give what you can to who needs it. You know, and a lot of people gotten away from that.
Absolutely. Bobby, any last thoughts?
Just talking about history, and yeah, I think it was from what I was taught about that history from my family was that there were wonderful times when the Europeans came. They were the first wetbacks. They came on the boat and they came to America and they were starving, they were sick. Native Americans taught them how to grow corn, how to fertilize, how to hunt, how to game, harvest game, how to survive and survive in the new country. Everybody got along. I thought it was wonderful, how it started. And to tell you the truth, there wasn't that many Europeans or white races. They depended on the natives because they knew that the Native American could help them survive and live and prosper, which they did. And growing up, even in the 50s and 60s, like I did, I never saw that much racism. Of course, I know that the women were given the right to vote, and what was it, 1920, and blacks were given the right to vote without paying a poll tax in 1965. And even then, I saw just sporadic racism amongst whites. Of course, I didn't realize so many were in the closet till Trump became president. I had never seen so many white people that are racist. It's just blown my mind since Donald J. Trump, alias Trump, became president. These people with so many white people, so racist. It's going to be a problem more for them than it is for us. So I think they'll understand that as time goes on, because it's really out of hand to be like that and be an American.
Okay. Well, thank you all very much. And as Marissa says, I always forget to do the commercial. All right, so I'm just going to pan down here for a second. So this is a T-shirt that all the panelists are going to get. So I'll be in contact with you to get your shirt sizes and your address and send those out to you. For all the attendees, unfortunately, you have to pay for yours. So that's $10 a piece, right? But you can go. It's a beautiful shirt to go and let people know what you support, right? And in this case, it's diversity, and as the shirt says, diversity is strength. Unity is strength, and diversity is power. So just $10. Go out to the SCGCC website. You'll see a place where you can donate and order a T-shirt, and we'll send it out to you as soon as humanly possible. Makes for great Christmas gifts, right? Bobby can send it to his Trump supporting friends if he'd like. Although we really don't get political in here, but but again, thank you very much. Thank you for all the attendees. We will not be having one in December. The planning team is going to figure out what other cultures we want to highlight, right, to celebrate. And so we'll have that list out here probably first of the year. All right, everybody. Thank you so much.